Good morning, everybody. For everyone that's there. Avantika, it's good to have you. Oh, I think you're muted.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Yeah.
Thanks, Avantika. So I just want to introduce a couple people that are here for the first time. First, we have Avantika, who is joining us after a long, long time. It's really nice to have you. And we have, and then we have Ashita. Ashita is also one of Palak's friends. Palak,
Hi, everyone.
Palak, do you want to introduce Ashita?
There may be some feedback since I'm in the other room in the house. So great. So and
Ashita, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I can just introduce myself.
Perfect.
Hi, guys. Palak and I met at university, and we haven't seen each other since like COVID happened, and then we somehow happened to meet at a restaurant, and then we got to know Ricken, and then he told us about this amazing book club that you guys have, and I also am very interested in the Gita, and I try to read it whenever I have the time. So this is such a great opportunity for me to be here. Just thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Thank you. Ashita, Avantika, anything about yourself in the last year?
Yes, so great time. I remember the last time we met with Simon, I actually asked him about this book, even though we were meeting about the previous book, because this is a book that I feel ready for. It's very synchronistic that I received the invitation, just felt called to it. So I'm at that phase in my life where I have a lot of need for applying some of these practically. So I'm really looking at the satsang and learning and the guidance to be able to do that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. And recently I was in touch with Simon just to figure out dates for when he'll be joining us for the first time. So please stay tuned. So I'll go ahead and just share my screen and we'll get started. So for those that remember, we are in this, so we're in the third section of this book. So this section is called The Blind Emperor, the Invisible Dark Night of the Soul. So just before we get started, we always just review a few things. One is the culture that we're trying to promote in the group, which is 3 principles. One, that everyone brings their full presence and participation to the group. The second is we have respect for all those that are coming from all our various parts of the world, backgrounds. And the third is the determination to do the work that's being called of us in this group. And for those that have been here, can we just recall our 2 practices for humility? So remember the 2 things we want to remember and the 2 things we want to forget. Can anyone name those? The 2 things to remember. All right. So remember our practice for humility are remembering 2 things and forgetting 2 things. The 2 things we should always try to remember are what good others have done for you. And then the second thing we should remember are what bad we have done to others. So these are both practices. The good others have done for us always help us remember that we need we need the company of others and to appreciate everything that's come to us. And the bad we have done for others also keeps us in a space where we're always looking to improve. And then the 2 things we should always try to forget are what bad others have done to us and what good we have done for others, right? So again, I know I wanted to bring this in and make this part of our culture because again, we talked about at the beginning, the first session, how this quality of humility is so important to understanding these teachings. And I thought these were 2 very practical ways of applying and trying to develop this quality further. So for those that needed a reminder, here they are. And so we'll just go ahead with our initial invocation. And this is to bring in good fortune and respects to all our teachers. So I will go ahead. Om Gyanti Mirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chaksur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangu Langyete Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Bande Shri Guru Dinataranam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sunda Evacha Patita Nam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So we're offering respects to our spiritual teachers and mentors who have opened our eyes with the torch of knowledge. And the second is we're offering our respects to our teachers who I always say can make what is impossible possible. And the third is offering our respects to all those that have gathered who are divine seekers of and are full of compassion for all living beings. So just a quick review of what we have covered. We won't stay here too long. Remember last week we started and we talked about, we introduced the character of Dhritarashtra, right? And so Dhritarashtra, he represents this invisible dark night of the soul, right? So earlier we talked about the 4 characteristics of what constitutes a dark night. Can anyone recall those 4 symptoms of a dark night? You can look at your notes, it's okay. If you have them. Anybody?
So Rick, and good morning.
Morning.
Stacy. So there were the suffering associated with the 3 phases of time.
Yes.
Fear of future, fear of the future, lamenting the past, and confusion in the present.
There you go. Yeah, so that's one
That's
of
the
the
first
4.
one. Mm-hmm.
Anyone have the other ones?
Revealing your dark side, the dark side, revealing our
the revealing of our dark side. And the third?
Complete help. Sorry, I don't know what the order, but complete helplessness.
Yep. That's the 4th one, but
to retreat in your life, to regress back and retreat.
Yeah, so the tendency to retreat and just walk away from the world, to not face it. So a sense of escapism. And right, so that was the 4 symptoms of a dark night that we can all visibly see in our life. Now, Dhritarashtra, he represents what we would know to be an invisible dark night, which means that it could be persisting the duration of our life and we may not be aware of it, right? And so this is a really important thing to deliberate on because, and we said the root cause for why we can have an invisible dark night was when we tend to take our story too seriously in life, right? And so when that tendency to take our story too seriously, it brings up this quality that we introduced last week called avidya, or ignorance, right? So vidya means knowledge and avidya means the absence of it. So really, as Simon says, our inability to see things as they are. And so then last week we talked about these clouds of confusion, and we won't get too much into that, but really what it's referring to is that there is knowledge. Remember, the qualities of the soul are, we are always, eternally present. We're full of knowledge and full of happiness. And so like the sun is always, this is always within us. And like the sun is always there, but when clouds are there, we don't see it. And so these clouds we refer to as the clouds of confusion, but as soon as these clouds are removed, again, the inherent sun that's within all of us shines. So that was that terminology of clouds of confusion that we talked about. This was last week, we introduced this as a companion to the dark night of the soul. If anyone wanted to read the specific text, that you could always go to this book. It's tremendous, and it's very simply written. The author, he wrote this book specifically for his children to be able to explain this wisdom to a very young audience. So again, it's written for all of us who just want to be able to read some of the more specifics. And then last week we had this as a reflection question. This is pretty much what we ended on, but we talked about this quote that Simon has: when the man is blind, what use are the eyes? And so we really tried to reflect on an experience that we've had previously in life on when we later realized we were blind. So the whole point of the exercise was to try to pick up on any clues or patterns or hint as to how, how you got to that point, for the purpose of trying to be able to potentially recognize something like this in the future. And so that's where we left off. And the question that I wanted to start off with, there's a lot of great content in this, but before we get there, I wanted to see, I wanted everyone to just take a minute. Again, we're in this chapter of trying to remove this consciousness of Dhritarashtra, the emperor, the blind emperor, both figuratively and literally. But we wanted to try to shine the light on an area in our life. So again, the question is here, is there any area of life that we're sweeping under the rug or not paying attention to that you can lean into, right? And so this is coming from the place of Dhritarashtra's main quality or main, you could say, downfall is that he says here, he was incapacitated on acting on what he knew what is best, right? And so, that may also be, to some extent, that may be also within us. And so I just wanted everyone to take a few minutes to deliberate on this. And, this just involves going to a place where we may not go so often, but I think it's worth reflecting on. So that is the question for everyone to ponder for the next couple minutes. Does anyone have any questions? And then if anyone wants to share, that'd be great. But I just wanted everyone to take a couple minutes to think about this. I will put the question back up as well. So again, just all things to get us to shine the light on places maybe we don't so often. I have to reshare. All right. Does anyone have any thoughts or reflections they wanted to share on this? Again, this could be habits that we used to have. It would be potentially relationships we want to come back to or revitalize. Could be things that we've, I mean, just even small things like decluttering our place. I always find that decluttering our physical space helps us to clear our mind as well. But does anyone else have anything they want to share? And again, it may be very personal, so that's fine, but please go ahead. We have a contemplative audience today. All right, so we will, if no one has anything to share right now, we will go ahead and move on. So we're going to be moving on to what is an incredible story that we're going to read together. So for those that have this this book or they have the ebook, can everyone open it up? We're going to go to the beginning of section 3 in this 3rd chapter. It starts with every year monks and pilgrims from all over India travel on a pilgrimage. And we're going to read this whole story. It's so good together. And I wanted to see if anybody wanted to read. Anybody up for reading?
Sorry, could you just tell me where we're supposed to be on?
Yeah, so in the 3rd chapter, so the blind emperor, we're in section 3. So I mean, in my ebook, it's on page 61, but it may not correlate to where the physical book is.
Okay, I found it. Thanks.
Perfect.
I can go. Oh, are
Please.
you doing it?
Yes.
Go
ahead.
Oh, is Avantika reading it or?
Okay, please go ahead. I was locating it.
Sure. Every year, monks and pilgrims from all over India travel on pilgrimage to the old town of Navadip, situated on the bank of the Ganges. Navadip was once the flourishing capital of Bengal, great Sena kings, and one of the leading centers of learning in all India. The occasion presents a special opportunity each year to listen to some of the wisest monks share their deepest insights. With a small group from my temple monastery, I crossed the breadth of India and arrived in Navadip, wondering what treasures I might take into my heart. I don't know if you've ever seen a banyan tree. They're magnificent. They drop adventitious roots from their branches, which tumble to the earth like the matted locks of a rishi or sage. I have read about entire forests in times past made up of a single enormous tree. Hundreds of monks have assembled onto 2 large banyan trees on the bank of the Ganga. In the distance, Ganga dolphins leapt periodically out of the water. The sun and moon were visible in the same sky, which was daubed in vivid pinks and streaks of red. Should I stop here?
Sure. Does someone else want to try reading? Avantika, please go ahead.
Oh, okay. One elderly monk, dressed in cotton garb, the color of the rising sun, stood up to speak. He began telling a story. Once there was a young prince, the future ruler of a prosperous land. Carrying a bow and quiver of deadly arrows, he entered deep into the jungle on a solitary hunting expedition on the back of a beautiful, swift steed. Deep in the forest, he spotted a deer. As the prince fixed an arrow to his bow and took aim, a tiger suddenly roared loudly, piercing the silence. The prince's horse rose on its hind legs in panic, hurling the prince to the ground, and bolted. As the prince picked himself up, he saw a Bengal tiger approaching slowly, its eyes locked on him like golden embers. His heart pounding, the prince fled for his life. The jungle had many trees with long, fearsome thorns, which extended like knives. As the prince crashed through the jungle, he slashed his arms and legs. Repeatedly, he fell to the ground, but he picked himself up and kept running. In the distance, he saw what looked like a clearing. Perhaps he would find a settlement or a house there. But there was no shelter to be found. If anyone had lived there, they had long since left. As the prince ran into the open clearing, he found himself falling into a dark abyss. In his rush, the prince had failed to spot a disused well, now covered by long grass. He plummeted into the darkness. Somehow, as he fell, the prince caught hold of two overhanging roots of a banyan tree. These roots broke his fall. Does someone else want to read?
Does anyone else have the book?
I can continue if no one else wants. The prince found himself dangling halfway down the abandoned well. He peered down, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. The well was deep and held no water. At its base was a nest of slithering serpents and quivering scorpions. He could hear their anxious hissing. The prince looked up. The tiger was circling the mouth of the well. That's really no problem at all, the valiant prince thought to himself. I'll simply hang on tight and wait. Sooner or later, the tiger will lose patience and leave. I'll then climb out of this hazardous hole and retrace my steps back to my kingdom. He began imagining the relieved reception he would receive. What a tale that would make for the young princesses at the palace. The prince's brief reverie was disrupted by a scratching, grating sound. He looked up. A white rat was gnawing away at one of the two branch-like roots that supported him, and a black rat was eating away at the other hanging root. The prince tried to shake them off, but they seemed unperturbed. Now I'm in real trouble, the prince thought. But just then, something moist dripped onto the prince's face. It rolled down his cheek to the corner of his lips. It tasted unexpectedly so very sweet. The prince stuck out his tongue. Another drop fell squarely into his mouth. Honey! He opened his mouth for more. When the prince fell into the well and caught hold of two overhanging banyan roots, his fall had disturbed a bee's nest high in the trees. Drops of honey were now falling from the ruptured hive. The prince looked up. When will the next drop fall? He thought expectantly. In that moment, the prince forgot all his troubles. He became oblivious to the very real and dangerous predicament he was in. As he searched intently for his next drop of honey, it was as if a spell, a type of sightlessness, had overcome him. And with that, the monk fell silent and sat back down. What did the story mean? I looked around me. Pilgrims were glancing at each other, puzzled and curious. I saw one elderly monk who was smiling. Clearly, he understood the deeper meaning of the story. He now stood up and began to speak. We are each the prince, he said. You and I have a kingdom, the territory of our life. Like a prince or a princess, we are of royal descent. We have the potential for greatness, but we've not yet taken guardianship of our kingdom because we've not yet mastered our perpetual world, the kingdom of our life. The prince goes out hunting in the jungle where he injures and kills defenseless animals for sport. Similarly, our world spins on exploitation. With great ease, we're ready to inflict pain on others, or at least remain oblivious to the suffering of others in the pursuit of our own trivial ends. The prince enters the jungle as a hunter, but he ends up being the hunted. The tiger symbolizes death. Throughout our life, we're mostly oblivious to death, but every so often we hear its loud roar. Maybe a friend or a family member becomes ill or dies. Maybe we have a narrow brush with death. The prince falls into an abandoned well. This is the small human story that imprisons us, causing us to suffer in this world. The prince manages to catch hold of two overhanging branches. These represent the good and the bad in our life that we cling to.
Avanti, I can finish.
Sounds good.
Okay. What do the two rats symbolize? The white rat represents daytime and the black rat night. We don't know how much time we have left in this world, but two things we know for sure. The first is that whatever time we have left is limited. It is finite. And the second is that this finite amount of time is being eaten up with every passing day and night. Suddenly we become aware of just how precious human life is. What are the drops of honey? They symbolize comforts available to us that follow us, that allow us to forget the perilous situation we're in. We each have a set of habits and preferred pleasures that create a false sense of comfort for us. This can include even our relationships, our job, our retirement plan, and other false insecurities. They allow us to become oblivious to the passage of life so that we stop truly living. Like the prince, we remain suspended in an abandoned well far from the kingdom we are to inherit. Searching for a few drops of honey in the sky, the prince has forgotten who he is and that his dry, perilous well is not actually his home. He's become blinded even to the fact that he's in mortal danger. Instead, he loses himself in the search for a few drops of fleeting pleasure. This forgetfulness or ability to ignore reality is a type of sightlessness. The ancients called it avidya, ignorance. It's the invisible dark night of the soul. This story affected me deeply. It aroused me. I may have experienced crisis in my life, but I thought I'd crossed over these dark periods. Here was a deep, dark night that I was in right now, even as I imagined I was free. This was a dark night I couldn't even see. Sometimes when I share this story in workshops or at yoga studios, someone rightly asks, how does the story end? Nothing in the well can save the prince, I reply. To get out of our predicament, we'll need help from outside the well. We'll need something higher than the conditioned thought process that have placed us where we are. Krishna's yoga teachings of Bhagavad Gita come to us from outside the dark well of our current troubled existence. That's a blockbuster story. I mean, if you remember, Simon recounted this story the first time he spoke to us, and I had heard it from him even previous to that. And every time I hear it, it's one that really just, it should be a little bit jarring, because this situation is not just including Simon. I think there's a place for this story in all of our lives. Does anyone have any thoughts or reflections to share on this story about what the different personas in this story signify?
I love how you had the pictures with that really just summarize in a few words the different phases. I think that's really helpful to also just understand, right, the story. I love the image of the honey, because it's just like, here, you're just like all this, and he's in the moment, and what's he gonna do and everything, and then the honey comes and it's just like, oh, okay, I'll just hang here.
This picture is really like, you see him, these drops of honey that are falling, you're like, what are you doing, right? And so many times we're in that same position.
Yes, absolutely.
Doesn't it happen that when even just when we have to get something really important done and we need to be disciplined, that honey is like that fleeting distraction we go to, right? I mean, just as a simple example, when we have to be focused or disciplined, or there's something really important that requires our time, that honey are those distractions that that really completely take us away from what we need to be mindful of and in the moment. And so what the honey symbolizes, right? The comforts available to us that allow us to forget the perilous situation we're in. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, Stacy. Anyone else have any comments on this story?
I could share something.
Please.
I think what really strikes me about the story is the things that we imagine to be our creation are not, that we take so much credit for, because we require a lot of guidance from outside the well of our lives. And the things that we attribute blame to others for are usually out of our own creation. So that is something that really strikes me, that a lot of the messes that we land up into, the hamster's wheel that we keep going round and round, and trying to find people that were the cause for that, vilifying people in the, you know, in our stories of our lives that we tell ourselves. They are usually because, like, this prince wouldn't have been the predicament if he hadn't been, you know, just chasing a mindless sport. And a lot of times, a lot of problems in my life, at least I'm sure everyone can relate, have been things because I've been doing things which are not authentic to who I am, or not in, you know, keeping with good dharma. And they usually land me into the well. And then usually the most of the times that I have had good fortune to, you know, be in the right place at the right time, that has rarely been as a result of what I have done, but has always been an act of grace or good guidance from outside.
Oh, it's such a good point, Avantika, that you know, our problems we usually put ourselves into, and the great things that happen in our life, they're usually something that are beyond our own doing, and they've come to us, right? That's such a great point. Thank you. There was a great teacher. He was asked by his student that how come I get blamed for things that I haven't done, right? And the teacher's reply was so tremendous. He says, because previously, either in this life or a previous life, you received credit for things that you did not do. So that was his answer to that question. And I thought it was such a powerful answer to that. And again, it speaks to Avantika's point about authenticity, right? That's why I was just bringing it up. So any other, thank you for sharing, Avantika. Anything anybody else wanted to share from this story? All right, so we will move on then, but really the point that we wanted to make with this story, and that Simon is trying to make, is that, you know, this conflict that we have on the battlefield that we see, that the setting of this book is. I know we've taken some time to kind of really depict the setting, the characters, but this conflict of the battlefield of Kurukshetra, it in fact represents this battle within us. And, you know, Simon makes this point. He says, a battle we're sure to lose if, like Dhritarashtra, we remain blinded by the attachment to our story. So it's just again, we all, you know, as Simon says, we're all a king or a queen of our kingdom, right? And so but on that kingdom, there's also this battlefield as well, and that we have to really, really try to step out of our own story. And this point here we're going to bring up next is really kind of speaking. I don't know why is that happening. This last point in section 4 that's made here is that Simon reveals a secret that had been shared with him by his teachers, was that they realized that, you know, times of despair and crisis, they in fact can be seen as times where there's an opportunity for great wisdom to come about in our life, right? So that's a unique vision to see. And I know, and clearly it's usually hard when it's in the moment, but the point is that if we can see every situation, even the difficult ones, as an opportunity, right? That involves changing our vision by which we see it. Then in fact, as we see, even the difficult times can be that foundation, that impetus for us to cultivate deep wisdom, make better choices in our life, and change the direction and the course of our life. So I thought this was a really important teaching that Simon highlights in this last section here, is this battle that's obviously within us, but that it says here, the seers and sages of India drew an important conclusion that despair can help us on the path of deep wisdom. It can help us become aware and ultimately even dispel the underlying imperceptible dark night of the soul that affects us all. Thus, crisis itself is an important yogic path. So the final point that's made in this chapter is that, and this is the very last verse of the Bhagavad Gita, that Sanjay, King Dhritarashtra's or Emperor Dhritarashtra's is a messenger who's recounting, telling him about this, what's happening on the battlefield. He specifically says that when we apply the information that the Krishna's yogic teachings throughout this book, these are specific results that are coming about, that will come about. One is good fortune. The second is victory. The third is strength or power. And the fourth is abiding to wise conduct. So the discrimination to be able to do the right thing. And so these are all described in the very, very last verse of the Gita. And I'll just read it out for everybody. But he says here, where there is Krishna, Lord of Yoga, and the archer Arjuna, there will surely be fortune, victory, happiness, and morality. So these are the jewels that await us when we can take these teachings to apply. And the final question that I wanted us to discuss is this one, is how do we actively deal with trying to know or discover what we don't know, right? Because this invisible dark night is really that exercise, is we don't know something, but do we have a system in place for helping to uncover our blind spots in life, right? And so I wanted us to take a few minutes to think about what structures or, like people or systems that we may have in our life. And then we can hopefully share some ideas with all of us. But this is the question that I want us to take out of this chapter is, do we have a system by which we can try to discover, again, this chapter is, we don't know what we don't know, right? So then do we have a way of trying to figure it out, right? And again, this just refers to blind spots. So I just want everyone to take a couple of minutes to reflect on that, and then we will come together and discuss. So please go ahead. So we had a question earlier in the earlier sessions, and it's a little bit the same, but if everyone remembers the question we had on how we combat not taking our story too seriously, this is also a different way of asking a similar question. All right. Does anyone have any reflections on this question?
I have, if I correctly understood the question, I have 2 points that crossed my mind.
Yes, please.
Yeah, Ricken. First, I thought that while I'm sometimes when I'm expressing myself and hearing actively others, so I came to do my auto-reflection and understand these blind spots. This is one. And two, having very close people that knows me very well and I trust them. So sometimes they highlight on these blind spots and it's helped me a lot.
Yeah, it's such an important point that you bring up, is people that are close to you in your life, right? And not only that, I think it also helps if we, sometimes we have to openly seek it, right? Also.
Yes, sir. Yeah, but these people should know us very, very, very well, very close people, not, very close friends or very close people who have been with us for, very many, many years. So this is the first thing that crossed my mind. And then the other thing that we're doing in the sessions, that when we're expressing or talking about any idea we're doing with you and Ida, we're doing auto-reflection. And for myself, I discovered a lot of blind spots, even when others, are talking in the group. So they are speaking our mind. I say, oh, well, this is the same. I have the same, point. This is very, very important.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I always feel that, this group that we have every week, we're basically building in a system for self-reflection, right?
Yes.
That's what I see as the most valuable part about coming together weekly is that we have so many things that we're busy doing every other part, but if we can at least create some time where there's a system where this is built into our, our life. So, but thank you for sharing that. Anyone else wanted to share?
Thank you.
Please, Paul.
So I think, being part of this group for sure has had a fantastic impact. And I think that was preceded by good books and followed by good books, autobiographies, documentaries. So basically exposing myself to things outside of my inner circle have been really, really good. And then also listening to the feedback provided by others, and rather than reacting defensively, asking questions and clarification. I think it's always good to do that. And in terms of the system, I think just as you just said about, it's your inner circle that knows you best. So listening to them especially. So those are basically the main areas. So books, groups, and people in the inner circle.
Nice, thank you, Paul. Those are all fantastic, for sure. The inner circle, books, usually they're going to be wisdom books. I agree. They really can help, introduce a new paradigm, right? So yeah, no, thank you. Anyone else have thoughts to share on what they have for themselves? Please, Rita.
What comes to mind again is just the practice of the quiet meditation, but sometimes if I'm not sure about something, if I'm not seeing some blind spots, I'll specifically ask the question, for me, I'll say, God, if this is not if this is not from you, then help it to kind of dissipate or go away, or help me to see. If it is from you, then help to kind of magnify the direction that I'm supposed to go. And I find that when I sit in quiet meditation, sometimes I'll get promptings of which way to go or not. And also, having that spiritual director or guide that I meet with monthly, actually, and kind of go over some of the things that have been happening in my life, and being able to shed wisdom that way, I find are good practices for me to try to catch some of those blind spots. That's it.
Yeah, thank you, Rita. You bring up such a great, what I see that at least you're mentioning in the first part is just really the practice of prayer, right? There's some element of prayer that to help to reveal what may be unknown to us. I think it's a really powerful practice to adopt. And then, yeah, having any type of what may be in the wakes of like a mentor, right? That's really what's happening in this book, is that Krishna takes the role of a mentor and a teacher. And I think that's vital. And then the question or the point that I wanted to just highlight from this point that you're making is how we can determine what is right guidance in our life. And so sorry, Hiba started on that, but these are three, when this was kind of shown to me, it really kind of captured how we can kind of evaluate right guidance in our life. And it's really, I mean, there's three terms that's used in Sanskrit, but someone who knows you, someone who loves you, and someone that can help you, right? And what I find interesting about these 3 points is that we have people in our life that might fit one or maybe two of the three, but not maybe necessarily all three, right? And I mean, I'll think back to an example to like a simple example. Like if we look at our parents and in reference to school, I'll speak in my own experience, but they know me, they love me, but they can't necessarily help me with the different challenges that I may be going through, with regards to, let's say, school or whatever I'm trying to learn, or, whatever I might be struggling with. So this is just something to reflect on, that, when we're trying to gain guidance or assistance in our life, this is, three very simple barometer points that we can, just at least take away and reflect on are we going to the right place for guidance as well, right? Because there are many people that may know us or love us, but are they in the proper space, or do they have the capacity to help us, right? Ashreya can help you. So again, it speaks to pretty much hopefully bringing together everyone's points that they were talking about in terms of what, in fact, is right guidance. And usually these things, as people have, said indirectly, require time, right? Require time for someone to be able to be in that position in your life before they can provide that proper guidance. So anyone have any thoughts or reflections on these points? I thought these were good. Go ahead.
I think that's so good. I love thinking about the last one, right? Because I mean, knows you, loves you, yes, definitely, maybe has a good intention to help you, but is just not able to, right? Because they haven't experienced it. They maybe even it actually hinders you, right? And by listening to their advice and just that discernment of being able to see who actually really can help you and will help you in the right way. I mean, I think this is just a great, very simple guide, right? Because not everyone is just simply in the position to be able to help.
Right. Yeah. And one thing that I wanted to point out with this can help you point is that I found that, definitely guides and mentors, they don't necessarily have had to have gone through that very specific experience that we've gone through. The Bhagavad Gita, they very clearly list out the 3 kind of classes of learners, right? And that the best type of learner is one who can just hear about something and learn, right? They can potentially, see what's coming down the road just by listening to the message or hearing the story. The second type of learner, the next learner, not as refined, is someone who has to experience it to learn, right? They actually have to go through it. They can't just see or listen. They have to experience it to go. And then the third, less even refined learner is one who will go through the experience and still then go through that experience again, right? So and oftentimes, that definitely is us. But the reason I'm bringing this up is that sometimes we look to people to help us. I mean, and it's natural for us to look at people who have necessarily, who can maybe relate to our experience, but that can help you person, I feel, also has a level of discrimination and intelligence that they've not only gained wisdom, but they've processed it in a way that they're living it as well, right? So I always think of that can help you person as that person who's applied and living the wisdom in their life, and not necessarily someone who's maybe encountered everything that you've encountered. So it may look a little bit different than what you might be looking for as well. Does that point make sense? All right. Anyone have any closing comments or thoughts? Ida, you've been quiet today.
I'm a student today. What I want to say is, what comes to mind as I'm listening to everyone on reflection is, I think we live, so I guess this is from a personal experience. I believe that we live in two paradigms. One is our physical paradigm, and the other one is our spiritual paradigm. So, some of us have referred to where we seek guidance or teaching is through, our books and audios and mentors and gurus and teachers. But Rita, you also touched on it on prayers. And for me, what that talks about is our spiritual, that soul. I know that's a place I go to is meditation, and Rika knows this. And when I sit in that solitude of meditation, when I'm sitting on that battlefield, clarity comes or a message comes. I find when I'm coaching as well, it's like a download of messages that come, and I don't even know where it comes sometimes. And for me, having experienced that both from my meditation and also coaching people, it's just, for me, there's such a conviction and such a belief that our soul does talk to us. Our spirit also gives us the answers and the guidance when we really listen to that inner voice. So for me, from my own personal experience, it's both, Rickon. So I guess I'm inviting all of you, as we are in this forum, in this amazing community, because, and Hiba, you touched on it as well. When one person shares, it's like, oh yeah, I can really resonate with that, which really makes this group so beautiful, because when we share and we're vulnerable as well, we're actually we're giving something of ourselves to someone else who may need to hear that, just that one thing. Sometimes just that one thing, and you go, oh yeah, and it could be that breakthrough for what we want to see, what we need to see, and give us some I know it's like the rope to get up and out of that battlefield, to instead of being in it, to actually be able to look and see ourselves. So it's been a great session, Rick. I've been quiet because I'm listening and taking notes, and as you can see all the postings too, it's such a, like you said, this is such a great session. I know I'm going to go back and look at those questions and those snapshots that I shared on WhatsApp too. For our friends who missed out today as well, and they go through the recording, they'll also look at that. So another great session. Applause to Rickon.
Thank you everyone for joining us. And Ida, I just wanted to highlight the point that you brought up just there at the end, was that being open to what's coming from outside of us, whether it be wisdom, teachers, and then there's also the wisdom that's coming from within us. One of the ways that I try to do that is just by taking some time in the evening times. This part of my night practice is just having some journaling. So yeah, and again, that meditation practice is also in whichever form it may be, to be able to crystallize what's coming in from within. So, and I think that's also that, looking inside is also important, because ultimately, for whatever decisions that are coming to us in life, we should always be taking responsibility. And I think that's, the most important point amongst, all the advice that we may get, is just that personal responsibility. So thank you for highlighting that. And I just wanted to thank everyone for joining, especially, Avantika for reading. You did, thank you for reading, you and Ami, and also Ashita for joining us for the first time. Palak hasn't been around for a while, so thank you for joining also. It was really nice to have you. Shivani and Radhika, you guys are here together for the first time. That's great to see. So Shivani and Radhika are both sisters. Shivani's living in Atlanta. They're both living in Atlanta, but just in different parts.
Yeah, she is like about 2 hours or like an hour and a half north of me. So yeah, she's in school up there, so and college up there. So yeah, it's always great to be on at the same time.
Nice. And just in that spirit of trying to, what Ida was saying about the meditation practice, I will be sending out a doodle poll for restarting the meditation practice that we had at the end of this session. And I'd like to have it in the morning. We can do it another day of the week. And then I know for Ida, we want to also try to accommodate. We'll have one for her that falls in her morning as well. So we'll put out at different times that people can choose and go with the one that most people can make.